Our first scripture reading is from the book of Revelations, chapter 21, verses 1 to 6a. Hear now the word of God. Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. For the first heaven and for the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, "See, the home of God is amongst mortals. He will dwell with them as their God. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. Death will be no more. Mourning and crying and pain will be no more. For the first things have passed away." And the one who was seated on the throne said, "See, I am making all things new." And he said, "Write this, for these words are trustworthy and true." Then he said to me, "It is done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end." This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Let us open our hymnals to Still Away in 527. Stephanie will sing the verse and will join in the chorus.
The second scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel according to John, chapter 11, verses 32 through 44. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the people who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" And they said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. The people said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I've said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." And this is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
God works in mysterious ways. David and I were just talking before the service started. The piece he played for the prelude is actually titled "Not Alone," which, if you notice, is the sermon title for today. But it was not the original sermon title for today. Changed it on Thursday. Something's happening. I started thinking about this phrase, "not alone," because of a new horror film that I heard about called Not Alone. Tagline, an unsuspecting family buys a mansion for a bargain but discovers a presence in the home and must fight to save their lives. I did a little IMDb search for this title, Not Alone. Several horror films, it turns out, also called Not Alone. A residual haunting never leaves and never forgets. In 2015, Not Alone, when the past is better left buried. And in 2012, Not Alone, Shyla always lets her roommate not call the shots. But when an intruder, potentially the neighborhood serial killer, breaks into their apartment, the two roommates are separated and Shyla has to make her own decisions for their survival. You are not alone. How is it that you are not alone has become a threat? When really it's the opposite that's terrifying. What if I really am alone? This week, as we mark All Saints and All Souls days, we remember those who are gone from us, and we cannot help but feel a little bit more alone. Even outside of our lives, this has been a very intense couple of weeks, and it can feel like death is everywhere. Nothing makes us feel more powerless, more alone than the news headlines of continuing violence and displacement in Cameroon, of a militarized response to a group of people risking everything to walk for miles to try to make a new life, of the cruel words and legal posturing about our transgender sisters and brothers, of funeral services for 11 faithful people shot dead in their synagogue as they prepared for worship. The power of death looms large to me these days. It feels like this thick, sticky coating that's just over everything. And it makes getting through the day that much more difficult. And it makes reaching out to other people feel nearly impossible. It's particularly hard to deal with death in all of these various iterations when we live in a society that is so insistent on independence. We're isolated and alone. Death has even more power. The thoughts begin to run circles in our heads, and they have no escape. They only intensify. The more that we are unable to heal ourselves, to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, to just get over it already, the more that we feel that we have failed, and the deeper into death we sink. We're embarrassed to say that we need something. We're anxious to appear we have it all together. We're afraid to seem weak. Even our faith does not always help us as we wonder why God has not yet come to our aid, as we berate ourselves for not being good enough, or faithful enough, or believing enough to be healed. When we get to this point, what we need more than anything is to be reminded of who God truly is, and of the stories of our faith like the ones that we heard this morning. Because even though death lives among us, infiltrating the deepest parts of our lives, the words of the Revelation of John are true. See, the home of God is among mortals. God has pitched a tent among us. Our God, whose love is stronger than death, dwells right here with us, right now. And God has given us the most incredible tool for overcoming the power of death in our lives and in this world: each other. I love this story of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead. It just feels so true. Like it's not been mediated to make it seem very pious and proper. It just feels like how I would act in this situation. We pick it up with Mary, who, when she sees Jesus, she doesn't pause for a hot second to say, "How are you?" or "How was your trip?" She is angry, and she doesn't hide it. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." How often have we thought the same thing? But for some reason, we're worried it's wrong to think that or to say it out loud, that it would be impolite. But look at how Jesus responds. He doesn't gasp and say, "Mary, how dare you?" He sees how upset she is. And he becomes, the text tells us, greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. That is how God takes our anger. Friends, God is deeply moved when we cry out on one another's behalf. And Jesus is so deeply moved, in fact, that he begins to weep. God, the sovereign of the universe, crying for one that he loved. And this is the way that God loves each one of us, so deeply, so intensely, that if one of us were lost, God would weep. And not only is Jesus moved enough to cry, but also to do something. He calls for the stone to be rolled back, and while he knows that he's about to raise Lazarus from death to life, Martha has other practicalities in mind. Hold on a second, she says, it's going to smell real bad. It's not that she wants to keep Lazarus dead. It's not that she doesn't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. She's just being practical. There's a certain point up to which it makes sense to hope, and after that, it's best to just give up. She knows that it's beyond her to do anything for Lazarus, and since she can't solve this problem, she assumes that no one can. But Jesus challenges her assumptions and ours about who and what is beyond his help. There is no case too hopeless for God's love and power, nothing that stinks so much it cannot be redeemed. And then comes the really miraculous part of this story. As Lazarus comes stumbling out of the tomb alone, surely to the shock and surprise of those who are gathered, he is still bound up with these strips of cloth, his grave clothes, and he needs help. Unbind him, Jesus calls to Mary and Martha and the gathered crowd, and let him go. None of us can do this alone. That's not a truth you're likely to hear on TV, or in the political debates, or in self-help books, or even in a lot of churches. But it's true, none of us can do this alone. Especially as we confront the losses in our lives and the presence of death in our world, we need one another. All of us need help. We are bound to so many things we would rather be free from, but we can't escape the bandages on our own. We need more hands. We need the sacred community where God dwells. Because even when we have been brought from death to life without the care of the community, we may still find ourselves trapped. Friends, whatever has you trapped this morning, let us pull on those bandages. If you are angry, feel confident, like Mary, that you can just share your feelings with God. If you need to weep, like Jesus himself, please do not be afraid. Weeping is a sign of great love, which is the most powerful thing in this world, not the weakest. Maybe you, like Martha, have just given up hope. You want something better for your children, or you put yourself to work helping others, but you don't believe there's anything more, any chance that you might be raised up out of despair into new life. Friends, take heart. Jesus is calling you, and it is enough to raise you, enough to get you to the edge of the tomb where we can take over, where together with God, whose home is among mortals, we can unbind you and let you go. The best part of this good news, the best news, I think, is that not only is there hope of resurrection for us individually, but we have among us the power of God to help each other, to call to life in the deepest corners of our souls, and to call to care, to the work of unbinding and setting free. This is the power we will exercise in a few days when we go to vote, putting our hopes for one another down onto a piece of paper and dropping it into a ballot box or a scanning machine. We have among us the power of God to hope, to heal, and even to be raised to new life. And we are responsible to and for one another to share this power, to build hope, healing, and even resurrection in this place, in our divided country, in our ravaged and hurting world. In this room, there's faith, there's strength, there's perseverance and power, there's vulnerability and trust, there's hope and even joy. If we look other's faces. God, whose home is among mortals, is with us. The work of healing, of building, of living is not what any of us can do alone. And so God calls us to join her and one another, to gain strength from community, to become stronger through opening our hearts to love for our neighbors and those we thought were our enemies. The truth is, we will never be alone. May that knowledge comfort us this day and always. Amen.